Sir Nicholas Windsor and the Bells of Hollowgate. London, in the summer of 1853, breathed like a living thing. It inhaled through the Thames, thick with coal smoke and river rot, and exhaled through thousands of chimneys that stained the sky a perpetual shade of gray. Even on the brightest days, sunlight reached the streets only in fragments, fractured by brick, iron, and soot. The city smelled of many things at once: boiled cabbage drifting from tenement windows, horse dung crushed into paste by carriage wheels, hot metal from blacksmith shops, wet stone from alleys that never truly dried, perfume from passing ladies briefly masking the stench of poverty, and always, always, the faint, bitter tang of coal. It was a city that never truly slept. It whispered at night through rattling windows, and muttered in the early morning through coughing laborers and rattling carts. It groaned beneath its own weight, and yet continued to grow, swallowing villages and fields as though it were hungry for more. And somewhere within its veins walked Sir Nicholas Windsor. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned long ago how not to be noticed. Though tall and lean, he carried himself without arrogance. His long black coat brushed the tops of his boots as he walked, its fabric heavy enough to resist both wind and rain. Black gloves covered his hands even in the warmth of summer, and beneath his neatly trimmed dark hair, touched with gray at the temples, pale blue eyes observed everything. They missed nothing. Not the way a constable's hand rested too close to his truncheon. Not the way beggars shifted when he passed. Not the way shopkeepers watched him from behind their windows. There was something about him that unsettled people. They could never quite say what. Some thought it was the scar along his jaw, thin as a razor's kiss. Some thought it was the way he walked, as though he already knew what lay ahead. Others thought it was the eyes. Those eyes did not merely look. They measured, judged, remembered. On this particular morning, Nicholas Windsor walked eastward through Whitechapel, where the city grew meaner and poorer with every step. Here, buildings leaned like drunkards, propping one another up out of mutual necessity. Laundry hung between windows like surrender flags. Children with hollow cheeks played beside open gutters. And death had recently made itself known. It had begun with a bell, not one rung by human hand, not one tied to church towers or mounted upon carriages. This bell had no visible source. It rang at night, always at midnight, always once, always in Hollowgate Court. Hollowgate Court was little more than a crooked alley branching off Whitechapel Road. It curved sharply, hiding its end from view, as though ashamed of where it led. Tenements crowded its walls. The air inside it never moved. Even on windy days, Hollowgate lay stagnant, as if trapped in its own pocket of decay. The first night the bell rang, no one thought much of it. London was full of noises: drunken songs, screaming arguments, distant whistles, factory machinery, rats in the walls. One more sound hardly mattered. But the next morning, Mrs. Eliza Perkins was found dead. She lay in her bed, hands folded neatly upon her chest, eyes wide open and staring at nothing. Her lips were blue, her skin was cold, and there were no marks upon her. No poison, no wounds, no sign of struggle. The doctor declared it heart failure. 3 nights later, the bell rang again, and Mr. Thomas Ridley was found dead at his writing desk, quill still clutched in his fingers. Ink pooled upon unfinished words. Again, no wounds. Again, no cause. Again, the doctor shrugged. "Providence," he said. Then it rang a third time, and a fourth, and a fifth. 5 bells, 5 corpses. Always in Hollowgate Court. Always peaceful. Always inexplicable. By the 6th night, people had begun to whisper. And when London whispered, Sir Nicholas Windsor listened. Nicholas had no official title, no badge, no authority. At least, not yet. In 1853, he was known only as a private investigator of uncommon ability, consulted quietly by those who could afford discretion. He had served in foreign conflicts. He had traveled. He had studied things that most men avoided. And he had learned that the world did not always obey the rules people pretended it did. So, when a worried clergyman named Reverend Holloway approached him with trembling hands and a purse of sovereigns, Nicholas accepted. "Something walks in my parish," Holloway whispered. "Something that is not of God." Nicholas merely nodded. "Show me," he said. He arrived at Hollowgate Court just before midnight. Fog lay thick as wool. Gas lamps glowed dimly, their light strangled by mist. Shadows clung to brickwork like stains. The court was silent. Too silent. No dogs barked. No cats prowled. No voices drifted. Even the rats were absent. Nicholas stood at the mouth of the alley and waited. His watch ticked. 11:58. 11:59. Then, midnight. The bell rang. It did not come from above. It did not come from below. It seemed to ring inside the air itself. A single mournful tone, deep and metallic, vibrating in his bones. Bong. Nicholas felt it pass through him. Not merely heard, felt, like cold water poured into his chest. The sound faded. The alley remained unchanged. And yet, something had happened. He knew it. He stepped forward. Halfway down Hollowgate Court, he found her. A young woman, perhaps 20, slumped against a doorway. Her head lolled unnaturally. Her eyes were open and empty, her skin already cooling. Nicholas knelt. No wounds, no blood, no sign of violence. But her lips were blackened, as though frostbitten, and faintly, upon her throat, he saw something else. A mark. Not a bruise, not a cut. A symbol. Like a circle broken by a vertical line. He traced it lightly with his gloved finger. It was warm, still forming. "Interesting," he murmured. His investigation led him, 2 days later, to an abandoned bell foundry near Limehouse. It had closed 20 years earlier after an explosion killed several workers. Locals avoided it. They said the bells still rang inside at night. Nicholas entered alone. Dust coated everything. Cobwebs hung like funeral drapes. And in the center of the main chamber stood a single bell. It had not been there before. It was newly cast, dark, unmarked, and still warm. He placed his hand upon it. The metal pulsed, like a heartbeat. Then he heard footsteps. Slow, measured. A woman's voice spoke behind him. "You should not touch that." He turned. She stood in the doorway, clad in mourning black, pale, severe. Her eyes were too old for her face. "My name is Abigail Frost," she said, "and that bell is mine." Nicholas studied her. "Your bell is killing people," he replied calmly. She smiled. "No," she said softly. "It is collecting them." Before he could question her further, everything changed. 2 days later, he received a sealed letter. Royal wax, gold crest. An invitation. No, a command. He was to present himself at Buckingham Palace at noon. No explanation, no signature. Only, "By Her Majesty's order." Nicholas read it twice. Then, for the first time in many years, he felt something close to uncertainty. The palace was vast, orderly, and oppressively quiet. He was escorted through corridors of velvet and marble. Finally, he was led into a private chamber. There, seated at a writing desk, was Queen Victoria. She was smaller than he expected, but her presence filled the room. She regarded him steadily. "You are Mr. Windsor," she said. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I am told you investigate things others cannot." "I investigate what exists," he replied, "whether people believe in it or not." She studied him, then smiled faintly. "Good," she said. She rose. "London is haunted," she continued. "Not by ghosts, but by secrets." She stepped closer. "And I require a man who can walk among them." She stopped before him. "You will answer only to me. No one else. You will go where I send you. You will do what must be done." Her eyes hardened. "You will be my shadow." Silence filled the room. Nicholas bowed. "I accept," he said. And in that moment, Sir Nicholas Windsor ceased to be merely a man. He became something else. Something darker. Something necessary. London did not welcome secrets. It buried them. Under brick, under smoke, under noise, under time. But some secrets refused to remain buried. They rang. They screamed. They waited. And now, one of them had chosen Sir Nicholas Windsor. Nicholas left Buckingham Palace under heavy skies. Clouds had gathered like armies preparing for war, dark and swollen, pressing low upon the city. The air was thick, humid, and restless. He walked alone. No escort, no guards, no instructions beyond the Queen's words, "You will be my shadow." It was not an honor. It was a burden. He understood that immediately. Shadows saw everything, and were never thanked. He passed through St. James's Park, where families picnicked and children laughed, ignorant of the rot beneath the surface of their empire. He wondered briefly how many of them would one day ring for death. Nicholas returned to Limehouse that evening. The foundry stood as before, silent, waiting. Inside, the bell still pulsed faintly, but Abigail Frost was gone. Only footprints remained in the dust, small, light, barefoot. He followed them. They led to a cellar door hidden behind collapsed brickwork. He descended. Below, he found a chamber carved into the earth. Candles burned with pale blue flames. Symbols were etched into stone. Circles, lines, spirals, and names. Hundreds of names, scratched into walls. Some fresh, some old. He read them. Eliza Perkins, Thomas Ridley, Mary Clark. the victims, and others, going back decades. Not collecting, he murmured. Recycling. A journal lay upon a stone table. He opened it. It belonged to Abigail Frost. She had been born in 1821, daughter of a bell founder. When she was 9, the foundry explosion killed her father and 20 men. But not her. She had been inside. She had heard something that night. Not screams, not fire. A voice, calling from within molten metal, promising reunion, promising eternity. She had listened and learned. According to the journal, the bell was a conduit, a vessel. Each soul taken strengthened it. Each death refined it. When it reached fullness, it would open a gate. Not to heaven, not to hell, to something older, something that fed on remembrance, on grief, on names spoken in sorrow. The bell would make London its banquet. Nicholas closed the journal. Ambitious, he said quietly. That night the bell rang again, but not in Hollowgate. It rang in Westminster, near Parliament. One of the Queen's clerks was found dead at his desk, and panic followed. Newspapers whispered, politicians feared. The Queen summoned Nicholas again. Victoria stood at the window when he entered. Rain streaked the glass like tears. They are afraid, she said softly. Good, Nicholas replied. She turned. Can you stop this? Yes. How? By killing the bell-keeper. She hesitated, then nodded. Then do it. No hesitation, no apology, no ceremony. It was his first royal execution. Abigail fled through London's underbelly, through sewers, abandoned tunnels, forgotten catacombs beneath old churches. Nicholas followed. He learned her patterns, her rhythms. She rang the bell only after preparing a soul, marking them, weakening them. He discovered she sang to them in dreams, calling, lulling, stealing breath. On the 10th night, he found her beneath St. Bride's Church. There, in a crypt flooded with candlelight, stood the final bell. Larger, cracked, alive. Abigail knelt before it, her hair loose, her hands bloody. Stop, Nicholas said. She turned, smiled sadly. They took him from me, she said. My father, my family, my life. I am giving London what it deserves. You are murdering innocents. They were never innocent, she replied. They forgot. The bell began to hum. Names whispered. Voices rose. Dead voices. Nicholas felt hands brush his mind. Memories not his own. Children. Mothers. Lovers. Graves. He staggered, but did not fall. He drew his revolver. Abigail laughed. Bullets cannot stop eternity. No, he agreed, but conviction can. He fired. The bullet struck the bell, not her. The metal screamed, a sound like breaking stars. The chamber shook. Cracks raced across stone. The voices shrieked. Abigail screamed, not in pain, but in loss. No! She rushed him. He caught her, held her. She was light, fragile, human. Let it end, he whispered. Tears streamed down her face. I only wanted them back. I know. He snapped her neck. Clean. Merciful. The bell shattered. Silence followed. True silence. The dead stopped. London exhaled. The newspapers blamed faulty gas, bad air, God's will. The Queen knew better. She summoned Nicholas once more. She dismissed her attendants. They stood alone. "You did what was required," she said. "Yes." "And you did not enjoy it?" "No." "Good." She approached. "You will do this again?" "Yes." "Without recognition?" "Yes." "Without reward?" "Yes." "Without forgiveness?" He met her gaze. "Yes." She placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Then you are truly my shadow." She paused. "Sir Nicholas Windsor." She knighted him that evening, in secret. No witnesses, no record. Some men were born into greatness. Others earned it. Nicholas Windsor buried his. There was no parade, no public ceremony, no newspaper notice, no cheering crowds. In the annals of Britain, Sir Nicholas Windsor did not exist. Yet that night, within a candlelit chamber hidden deep in Buckingham Palace, Queen Victoria had placed a sword upon his shoulders and spoken words no one else would ever hear. "Rise," she had said quietly, "and remain unseen." From that moment on, he belonged not to himself. He belonged to the crown, to its secrets, to its sins. In the weeks following Abigail Frost's death, London returned to its routines. Markets bustled, factories roared, carriages clogged the streets. The poor still starved, the rich still dined, and graves continued to fill. But Nicholas noticed changes others did not. He heard phantom bells in quiet moments. He dreamed of molten metal and whispering names. He sometimes woke with unfamiliar tears on his cheeks. The dead had touched him, and they had not fully let go. The Queen arranged a small suite of rooms for him beneath Whitehall, unmarked, unlisted, accessible only by a forgotten staircase. It became his headquarters. There were files, locked cabinets, maps marked with pins, and a ledger. Inside were entries written in Victoria's own hand. Incidents, disappearances, rumors, phenomena, each awaiting his attention. The Empire had more ghosts than anyone knew. His second case came quietly. A letter. 3 words. The Thames walks. Bodies had been found floating upstream, against the current. Eyes open, smiling. Nicholas read the report, closed the file, and reached for his coat. Before he left, Victoria requested his presence. They met in her private study. She poured tea herself. "You may leave," she told her ladies. When they were alone, she spoke plainly. "Do you resent me?" He considered. "No." "Do you fear me?" "No." "Do you hate what you do?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then you are still human." She leaned forward. "My husband is dead," she said quietly. "My children will rule one day. My empire spans the world. And yet I am alone." She met his eyes. "You are the only man I trust with my nightmares." Nicholas bowed his head. "I will keep them from you," he said, "whatever the cost." Over time, he learned what it meant to be invisible. Ministers ignored him. Generals dismissed him. Courtiers forgot his name, until disaster loomed. Then they whispered it, in fear, in hope. He was summoned for cursed artifacts from India, possessed sailors from Africa, vanishing villages in Scotland. He never failed, but each victory took something. Sleep, joy, faith, light. Years later, a doctor examined him after a violent encounter. "You should not be alive," the man said. Nicholas smiled faintly. "I hear that often." Inside, he knew why. He had been touched by too many endings. Death recognized him now, respected him. Sometimes, he thought, it waited for him. One autumn evening, long after Hollowgate had been demolished, Nicholas walked alone along the Thames. Fog rolled thick. Gas lamps flickered. For a moment, he heard it. Bong. Soft, distant. Not real. A memory. He stopped, closed his eyes, and whispered the names he had read on that wall, so they would not be forgotten. In 1861, after Prince Albert's death, Victoria summoned him in grief. She wept openly, clutched his coat. "I am afraid," she admitted, "of dying." He did not offer false comfort. "Everyone is," he said, "but you will not die alone." She looked at him. "Will you be there?" Yes. And he was, years later, in silence, in shadow. Few knew Nicholas Windsor. Fewer still understood him. He never married, never retired, never stopped walking London's darkened streets. Children sometimes saw him pass and fell quiet. Dogs refused to bark at him. Criminals crossed themselves. He had become part of the city, like fog, like stone, like history. Once, a young clerk asked him, "Sir, why do you do this?" Nicholas considered, then answered honestly, "Because someone must. And because if I do not—" He paused. "Others will suffer." Long after he was gone, after records vanished, after graves were lost, after names were forgotten, stories remained. Of a tall man in black, of pale eyes in the fog, of a scar that glinted in lamplight, of footsteps following evil, of bells that never rang again. And in Buckingham Palace archives, sealed forever, lay a single page, in Queen Victoria's hand. Sir Nicholas Windsor, my shadow, my shield, my conscience.